It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where the mist hung low over the water and the lake reflected back the rising sun in pure glass. My cabin, tucked neatly at the far end of the shoreline, had been my retreat for over 15 years. I built it with my own hands, logs, sweat, and patience. It wasn't just a place to fish or watch the seasons change. It was where I went to breathe, which is why what happened that morning still makes my blood boil when I think about it. The knock on the cabin's door wasn't gentle. It was sharp, impatient, the kind of knock meant to declare authority where none existed. When I opened the door, I wasn't surprised to find Karen standing there. If you've ever lived in a community with an HOA, you know exactly the type. Clipboard always in hand, lips pursed like she's permanently tasting something sour, eyes scanning your property as though each blade of grass was a violation. Except this wasn't even HOA jurisdiction. My cabin sat on private, inherited land completely outside the community rules. Karen knew that. Everyone knew that. But Karen wasn't alone. Beside her was a couple I had never seen before. Middle-aged, dressed like tourists, wide smiles on their faces as though they'd just arrived at a lakeside rental. "Good morning," Karen said, without waiting for me to reply. She gestured to the couple. "This is John and Patricia. They're friends of mine, and they'll be using your cabin for the weekend." I laughed, not the amused kind, but the stunned, sharp laugh of disbelief. "I'm sorry, what?" Karen smiled tightly, as if I'd just misunderstood the rules of her little game. "They came all the way from out of state, and I promised them a cozy weekend by the lake. Your cabin's just sitting here half the time anyway. I figured you wouldn't mind giving them the keys. It's not like you're renting it." The couple waved politely, clearly expecting me to step aside. My hands curled into fists against the doorframe. "This is my property," I said flatly. "You don't figure anything about it. No one stays here without my permission." Her face twitched, the way it always did when someone dared defy her. "Don't be selfish," she snapped. "You have more than enough. They won't cause trouble. They just need a quiet weekend. And it's good hospitality to share." Hospitality? My patience was thin as fishing line. "You show up here with strangers, demanding I hand over the place I built with my own two hands, and you call that hospitality? No, get off my porch." The couple looked shocked at my bluntness. Patricia stammered, We were told this was all arranged." "It's not," I said firmly, locking my gaze on Karen. "You lied to them, just like you lie to everyone else about your so-called authority." Her smile cracked, replaced with the familiar venom. "You'll regret this. The HOA will hear about it. Everyone will hear about how selfish you are." "Funny thing," I replied, stepping forward, lowering my voice. "The HOA has no power here. And the sheriff? He does. Now leave before I make the call." For a moment, I thought she'd back down. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, "You wouldn't dare." That was her mistake. I pulled out my phone right in front of her and dialed the sheriff's office. The tourist's smiles vanished, and Karen's face drained pale. I gave the address, thanked the dispatcher, and hung up. "You've got about 10 minutes before the sheriff shows up," I said coldly. "Use that time wisely." The silence after my words was thicker than the lake fog. The couple whispered nervously to each other, realizing they had been dragged into something ugly. Patricia tugged at her husband's sleeve. "Maybe we should just leave." But Karen wasn't done. She squared her shoulders and hissed, "You think calling the sheriff scares me? I know people. I sit on the HOA board. I have influence." "Influence?" I cut her off. "On what? My land? My cabin? You don't control me, Karen. You've been itching to stick your claws into this place for years, and I'm telling you now, it'll never happen." Her eyes flickered with that obsessive greed I've seen before. She hated that I owned a slice of paradise she couldn't touch.
While she argued about mailbox heights and lawn paint colors, I had a cabin, a dock, and an acre apiece she could never regulate. That burned her more than anything. The sound of gravel crunching interrupted the standoff. A sheriff's USV rolled up the dirt path, tires spitting dust. Relief washed over the couple, but panic sparked in Karen's eyes. Sheriff Miller stepped out, adjusting his hat, his broad frame filling the doorway as he approached. "Morning. Got a call about trespassers?" "Yes, sir," I said calmly, nodding toward the trio. "These folks showed up demanding access to my cabin. This woman," I adjusted to Karen, "promised them they could stay here without my permission." The sheriff turned his steady gaze on Karen. "Is that true?" Karen immediately put on her sweetest, fakest smile. "Oh, Sheriff, it's just a misunderstanding. We're all neighbors. I was just trying to help some friends find a nice spot to relax." The sheriff's brows furrowed. "By offering them someone else's private cabin, that doesn't sound like helping. That sounds like trespassing." The couple started apologizing all at once, voices tumbling over each other. "We didn't know. She told us. She said she arranged it. Please, we don't want trouble." I softened my tone for them. "You were misled. I get it. But you don't belong here, and she knew it." Sheriff Miller nodded. "I suggest you two head back into town. Find a legitimate rental. As for you," he turned his full attention on Karen, "this is the second time I've had to remind you this land is not HOA property. You step foot here again without permission, and you will be charged." Karen's mask slipped. She stammered, but Sheriff, surely you can't." "I can, and I will. Don't test me." The couple hurried down the path, muttering apologies. Karen, however, stood frozen, her face twisting between fury and humiliation. She spat. "You'll pay for embarrassing me like this." I smiled coldly. "The only thing I'll be paying for is firewood and fishing bait. Goodbye, Karen." The sheriff stayed long enough to watch her storm off, muttering curses under her breath. When her car finally disappeared down the road, the sheriff shook his head. "She won't stop, you know. Some people can't handle being told no." "I know," I admitted, "but she picked the wrong cabin this time." He tipped his hat. "Call me if she tries again. And don't worry, we'll make it stick next time." As his SUV pulled away, I stood on the porch, the lake glimmering behind me. The peace I had fought to keep was mine again. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't finished.
2 weeks passed in uneasy quiet. I patched up the cabin roof, tended the dock, even spent mornings fishing with the loons for company. But in the back of my mind, I waited for the other shoe to drop. It came one evening, just as the sun was bleeding red into the horizon. I spotted headlights crawling down the dirt path again. My stomach sunk. Karen's SUV. She stepped out, not alone this time. She had 3 HOA board members with her, clipboards in hand, acting as though they were inspectors. They spread out, circling my property like vultures. "What do you think you're doing?" I called out, striding across the porch. Karen smirked triumphantly. "We voted. The HOA is expanding jurisdiction to include the lakeside. Your cabin now falls under community rules, which means we can regulate your use, and we'll decide if it's appropriate for single ownership." I laughed so hard it startled them. "You think you can just vote yourselves power over private land? That's not how law works." One of the men stepped forward stiffly. "We're just conducting a preliminary inspection." "No," I said, my voice dropping to steel. "You're trespassing again." And this time, I didn't waste a second. I dialed the sheriff before they even realized it. When the SUV roared back down the path minutes later, Karen's smirk evaporated. Sheriff Miller stepped out, already shaking his head. "Didn't I warn you, Karen?" Karen puffed herself up. "We're here in official capacity, HOA jurisdiction."
"Stop right there," the sheriff barked. "The HOA has zero authority outside its boundary. This man's property is not yours to regulate, and now you've trespassed with witnesses." Karen tried to bluster, but the sheriff had enough. He pulled out his notepad. "Congratulations, Karen. You're under citation for trespassing and harassment. And if you set foot here again without permission, you'll be arrested." The board members, suddenly pale, dropped their clipboards and muttered excuses as they scrambled back to their cars. They had only come because Karen convinced them it was legal. Now they wanted no part of it. Karen, however, stood trembling with rage. "This isn't over," she screamed as the sheriff escorted her back to her SUV. But for me, it was. When the sheriff left and the dust settled over the path, I sat on my porch with a drink in hand, watching the lake. Karen had thrown everything at me, her lies, her fake authority, even dragging others into her schemes. And each time she had been slapped down by the truth and the law. She could rage all she wanted, but the cabin stood firm, my name on the deed, untouchable. The lake whispered back its calm assurance. Some battles you fight with fists, some you fight with patience. But the sweetest victories, those are won by letting your enemy dig their own grave while you sit back and enjoy the view. And as the last light faded, I couldn't help but smile. My cabin was safe. My peace was mine. And Karen, she was finished.